It's a pleasure having you on SaharaTV, sir. Once again.
Thank you.
What are some of the lessons that you feel that should have been learned as far as this elections is concerned, sir?
If you ask me, in my personal opinion, I don't think there are really lessons learned. If you look at our democratic journey and space, nothing has really changed tremendously. Well, some people have been declared winners, but some other people are in court. So it might be difficult to really comment on the critical issues concerning the election. But in my personal view, do we really learn anything? I doubt, if you ask. Because if you look at the democratic space and the burning issues before the elections, I don't think those critical mass were addressed by either the main losers or the main gainers. So we are like 360-degree backward, in my own opinion. And I don't think I have any apologies for saying that after 20 years of a democratic journey.
That's so sad. Let's look at the electoral umpire, INEC itself. How would you assess INEC's conduct of that election? Would you say that INEC actually conducted a free, fair, and credible election?
Well, generally, if you look at elections and electoral bodies in developing society, the issue of credibility, fairness, has always been a contentious issue. So, by the way, whether the elections were free and fair remain to be seen after the tribunal has taken a final decision. However, for the fact that the election was moved by a week shows the high level of incompetence of that body. And that again brought about what you might call voter apathy in the following week when the elections were declared. If you look at for the space of announcing the result that took an average of about 3 days, also leave much room to question credibility, fairness, and all that. But the courts are there that will come out with the final judgment at the end of the day. But if you ask me personally, I think there were a high level of incompetence that were demonstrated by INEC in an era that is driven essentially by technology, where we still resort to manual counting of votes. And personally, I think that why won't the result be announced from each of the voting centers, or what you call the polling booths, where a result is declared and the winner of that particular polling booth is known by the various agents, and you now move to a local government, to a state, then you bring professors to Abuja who couldn't even fix figures. And it was really an embarrassment personally to me, where professor was struggling to record a collated figures, what you sum up, which is just mere arithmetic, so to speak. So these are the critical issues that we need to address. And the reasons are not far-fetched. Those who had held the state for a while doesn't really want to free the state. And that's why the clamor for restructuring will continue to be a dominant issue. But we will address the territorial dimension of the state, which in other words is referred as decentralization or devolution of power. We are not making any progress.
So let's get this clarification, because it seems to be a burning concern, the decentralization of the Nigeria state in itself in the context of the elections, electoral body. How should these be done? How would you, I mean, what kind of restructuring could be done to make the electoral body one credible enough? I mean, and you know, that will actually be fair to Nigerians?
Yeah, I think the restructuring is not just electoral reform. It's reforming the Nigerian state. We are not a nation. And those who benefit from this fraud arrangement from 1914, and those who are benefiting do not seem to understand why we need to decentralize the state. The state is over-centralized, where power is domiciled with one individual who is like an overlord in an empire. If you read documents on the colonial administration, particularly the British colonial administration, you will understand where I'm coming from. Number one, why do we need to go to Abuja and get into a room and somebody is invited from River State to come to Abuja with a briefcase and announce the results? Why can't we announce the results simultaneously from each of the states, and you empower those states the way you allow them to declare senatorial and federal rep? So what was so special about the presidential election? After voting on a Saturday, it took an average of 4 days, so to speak, because the results came to speed by Wednesday. So essentially what I'm saying is that until we reduce the power at the center, then every other institution of state is fraudulent in its nature. We need to empower people. We need to diffuse power from the center. Take example, Lagos generates the higher number of the VAT collection. Then you give Kano State a bigger share of that. It's a misnomer. You create wealth in the South-South, and at the end of the day, the revenues are taken to the center, and you take a bag at the end of every 25 working days. You go to Abuja like somebody who's going to beg for money being owed to the state. So until we address these fundamentals, but the sad reality is that most people don't understand the fundamentals of restructuring. They just see restructuring as, if we do that, certain section of the country may not benefit. That's not true. It's what you call competitive and cooperative federalism, where everybody competes at their space and you contribute a little to the center. For example, Ondo State has the highest deposits of bitumen in Nigeria. But as we speak, it cannot be exploited. We still bring bitumen into the country. These are misnomer. Why don't you allow Ondo State exploit its mineral? The license to exploit is domiciled at the center. So you leave your state that is endowed with a particular resource. You go and meet somebody in Federal Ministry of Solid Mineral, try to see if you can exploit resources. This is the sad reality. So we need to structure the country politically, economically. Even the leadership itself is faulty. Take, for instance, at the end of this year will be 49 years that we had a civil war. The Igbos, as an ethnic group or as an ethnic nationality, has not really been integrated to the mainstream of Nigerian politics. So how do you get commitment from such group of people in an election? These are the reality. 49 years, almost 50 years after the Civil War, we have not had an Igbo president, so to speak, looking at it from the present arrangement. So we need a total overhaul. But the current crop of leaders will not allow those space. And that's one of the sad reality that the political upstarts of the new regime were supposed to occupy the space were emasculated by those who are stealing the state so blind, and that it just appeared that we had just two parties that took part in the election. So we need reorientation of our mind and a proper opening up of the democratic space. But I think by 2023, we will get near where we're supposed to be.
Talking about reorientation of the mind and the Nigerian electorate itself, and based on the result, will you say Nigerians are really, will it be right to say that Nigerians themselves are not really ready to be liberated? What's your perspective on this? Ready for the kind of change and alternative from the mainstream behemoths that has failed them over the years?
Yeah, the point is that it still boiled down to the issue of restructuring. Our mindsets are driven by ethnic sentiment, religious sentiment, and money sentiment, if you permit me to use that. A situation where somebody will not vote along the line of his conscience because somebody has given you 2,000 naira, which is just a plate of lunch, and you sell your future for 4 years, so to speak. So, and that's why I'm talking strongly about mind orientation. We are driven by ethnic sentiment and religious sentiment. Then we have those who have cornered the resources of the state, who now use money, because poverty has taken the conscience of most Nigerians. So people look for daily bread, and how they survive in every 4 years election cycle. So at the end of the day, it becomes troubling. And that gives another challenge with the kind of education that we're pursuing, you know, which is more of a paper qualification, where somebody cannot decide based on his conscience. I thought this was going to be a new dawn for Nigeria, but the disappointment were so shocking. But however, my personal comforting, if you permit, was that a majority of people couldn't make it back to the parliament. And I think that would be a good start. If we have a strong parliament, maybe that may make some little changes. Before
we go into the parliament itself, I mean, earlier on again, you mentioned the Igbos, and the Igbos actually unsettled their Yoruba host in the southwest, especially Lagos, which almost threatened almost resulted, led to inter-ethnic hostilities, which has calmed down. But considering the Igbo voting pattern, what does that portend for future elections in terms of the relevance of the Igbos themselves? For example, I mean, based on the results, for example, of the elections, Buhari won in 19 states, Atiku won in 17 states, including the Federal Capital Territory. Majority of these votes coming from the eastern part of the country. Do we see an Igbo presidency anytime soon?
Let me begin this way. Essentially, if you look at the results of the last election, and if you are able to disaggregate those figures over the years, the patterns of voting from the early 50s to the 60s and the truncated democratic process to these last 20 years, nothing essentially has changed dramatically. Nothing really. The voting patterns are essentially driven by ethnic sentiment, religious sentiment. Maybe what have changed is maybe a certain region having an alliance with another region, which just show those few percentage in terms of the major winner and the major loser. So for Igbo, by nature, they are Republican in nature, unlike the North, You have some homogeneous way of thinking, again based on their religious sentiment. Igbos are essentially Republican, and they are always on the move. So a greater percentage of the Igbos do not live in the east. They live in the central business centers like Lagos. So an Igbo presidency is possible, so to speak, if we expand the space, if we restructure appropriately. So it doesn't really matter wherever you come from. It does not really matter if we are able to restructure. But most of the leaders currently are paying lip service. You don't really need a constitutional reform to restructure. What do? As you pass bills to enable things to happen. So you don't need to. Even the president can make some essential changes by just changing certain things. But the speech, the acceptance speech before we came on air, there's really nothing that is comforting. No leadership vision that can say, okay, yes, I didn't hear any speech about maybe there were issues with the coalition, there were issues with the voting pattern. However, somebody has to emerge who address these critical issues. Nothing came in that direction. And that's why I say it was another sad day for the country. But those who are pro-establishment may have different view.
We also talked about the parliament, and the biggest loser, so to say, was the Senate president and the chief strategist of the PDP, Bukola Saraki, who was humiliated, so to say, in his home state. And we also saw what happened to Godswill Akpabio too. I mean, what does it portend for the National Assembly?
Well, for me, I want to look at it from another perspective. Number one is that the so-called big losers who are not returning to the parliament just shows that it's the people that are the game changer and that you can rise to prominence. But when it gets to a point where the people feel you are no longer relevant, they will undertake you. Permit my word. And the likes of Saraki and Akpabio, who couldn't make it back, will be a lesson, a litmus test to other leaders that are returning back, that they need to sit down and do their work. In another 4 years, the people will decide. In addition to that, Saraki losing or Akpabio losing, what is the impact to the people? I think essentially there really no much impact, so to speak. It's just that their space has been reduced politically. But if you look at Saraki's own dilemma, he's losing, I'm just speculating, is that he had an intention to contest the presidency. So the focus was at the center. And by the time he couldn't get through, an article came on board. By the time he went back to try and see if he can get back, a lot of water has passed the bridge, as you say.
Yes.
Yes.
Interesting indeed. One other issue that was quite, it was a talking point prior to the election was the issue of endorsements by elite powers, pulpit powers, so to say. Some politicians who left a score on endorsement, like the Afenifere in Yoruba land, and the various political groups. We have the Ohanese, who was rebuffed to some extent in the southeast, and the Northern Elders Forum of Ango Abdullahi, as well as the Middle Belt Forum. They are a consultative forum too. Isn't time for these so-called political or regional political affiliation or opinion molders? Is it time for a reality check of them as far as endorsement is concerned?
No, for me, I look at it as one of the fourth line. And it still boils down to the issues that we discussed earlier. where a state is centralized, every group trying to find political relevance. To that extent, an endorsement by Ohanese, South-South leaders, Afenifere group, they are all products of a failed state, so to speak. So they were really immaterial considerations because those associations do not really represent the people. They represent their personal interests. Afenifere does not represent the Yoruba aspiration, so to speak. So I just see it as a social association that want to find relevance in the state. That's my personal opinion. Talk about Ohanese. Does Ohanese really represent the Igbo aspiration? I doubt. They are just social associations whose leaders want to benefit from a faulty state, a fraudulent state arrangement. Once a proper restructuring is done, and you have leaders who have the aspirations of their people, the clamor for endorsement, clamor for social, political, ethnic group will die its natural death. Anyway, they were supposed to be opinion molder, but to what extent can you mold opinion and shape society when you had compromised in the past? So it's a mirage, it's a misnomer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Let's also look at the issue of militarization of the process itself. I mean, constitutionally, the military is supposed to protect the territorial integrity of the country, but this time around, we saw more military presence and in some of the states, like as evidenced in River states and some of the states where they were heavily militarized. I mean, what's your reaction to that? Should the military be involved in the electoral process?
Not at all. But again, so that we don't spare ourselves some time, is that where things are not right, everything goes. Again, that is a process of over-centralization of power, where you bring in the military, whose primary role is to protect the territorial integrity of the state. And you bring them into civil matter for the purpose of intimidation. And they had their ripple effect, even those who had intended them to favor them equally lose from such arrangement, because once people feel intimidated, then they cannot express their franchise.
That's true.
So that again resulted in high level of voter empathy. If you compare the number of registered voters and the result, that should bother people who are in leadership position. The ratio of those who voted for the presidential election to the number of registered voter, it calls for worry that the space was ganked in such a way that most people were disenfranchised in the final analysis. In other words, you use the military as an excuse for security. But that same military became a threat to the exercise of people's franchise. If you add the result of PDP and the APC together and just put it across the INEC, even if you look at the percentage of the youth who form a bulk of the voting public, there was a far cry from the expectations, in my own opinion. So I'm sure that if we have genuine reforms in terms of using technology to vote, why do people need to go to polling center in this time and age? Why don't you use your PVC and go into a place like an ATM and exercise your franchise, and you have a pool where those results can be collected? You just put your checks So why are we still talking about manual collation?
Despite the huge resources that was expended, that calls for concern too. Atiku and the opposition party has headed to the courts, and do you see anything coming out from the process, from the judicial process?
Well, it might be difficult to comment since the matter is before the tribunal.
But considering...
No, hold on. However, if this result can be authenticated, particularly from the various agents, and people are able to testify, and if the judiciary is indeed really independent, then something may just happen. However, if you look at precedent, some of the overlords who feel that all is well were beneficiaries of the judicial process. You can take a case in point. Amechi was in his bedroom when he was declared as the governor. But it's just that we don't have a sense of history as a people. Fayemi dislodged Shegoni. So many of those. So they were judicial process. So we can say there's hope if the judiciary is really independent and there are strong evidence that prove otherwise, then it's possible.
29 states to be going to the polls to elect who becomes a governor for the next 4 years. And considering what happened in the presidential and National Assembly elections, there are so many expectations. 19 states, like we said earlier, the APC won 19 states, while the PDP won 17 states, including the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. I mean, can we say this will play out, pan out again in this governorship election? Do you see that happening again, or do you see it differently, sir?
In my own opinion, I think the sentiments for the governorships are different from the presidential elections. In my own opinion, if you look at the trends are not likely to change from the way they are. For the presidential, some of the bulk votes that came from some concocted states from the north are not likely to be, and most governors who are in power in some of the stronghold of PDP will return. There are a few states where the political dynamics and the realities of the power mongers will change. There are some sentiments going around currently. So there will be gain and some losses here and there. But personally, I don't see the impact of the presidential election having anything to do with the states. We might get the status quo. What happened in 2015? I don't see any magic. I'm even of the opinion that APC may lose some of their states at the governorship election. Those are my permutation because of the power play in some of those states. I don't want to mention states at this particular point in time, but maybe as we progress, other things might lead to the discussion that will make those who are viewing us to see in those directions.
So what states are you probably looking at? I mean, that may be upset. There are some key battleground states that we...
Yeah, I'm thinking Oyo State and Ogun State. I don't want to comment on the issue of Lagos for now, but maybe as we progress, we can make an attempt. I have a strong feeling that for governorship, the Ogun State are likely to be for Oyo State. And is Kogi on the election? Kogi State, I don't think so.
Kogi?
No, I don't think so.
He's not part of it.
I'm more sure that the dynamics might change in Oyo and Ogun State. That's what I think. But the core South states, including my very good state, Delta State, I don't think anything is likely to change. But APC is trying to make an inroad into that state. But the 3 senatorial districts are not in harmony with themselves in terms of changes. But for Oyo and Ogun, we might see surprises.
Wow.
Where those surprises are likely to go, well,
only time will tell.
Yes.
That's quite interesting. What about the dots? Do you see any upsets? I mean, for example, let's look at Kano, for example. I mean, with the candidature of the PDP, Kwakwanso and the Kwakwansia movement, so to say, and the feelings Kano people also have against Ganduje, especially with the Gandola, the dollar gates issue he had. Do you see Ganduje still retaining his seat?
Looking at what happened during the last presidential election, it might be difficult to really comment on the issue of Kano.
Because Kano people actually voted, I mean, for Buhari, so to say.
Yeah.
But they don't seem to have the same sentiment for the governor.
Yeah, it might be difficult because if you look at the configurations of the average northerner, where people don't really work based on their personal commitment, it might be difficult to predict. But things might just change as well. But if you look at the kind of results that came from that place, for me, I see some of those results are spurious. Personally, figures are overtly too large. Yeah.
How about the Southeast, sir?
No, Southeast remains the way it's going to be. Apart from Imo State, that is a battleground, but the configuration is a bit difficult to understand as well. But that's a state where we might see some changes. But it's not too clear. Maybe by tomorrow, as we look at the horse trading and all that, then maybe one may be able to predict. But for now, it would be very, very difficult.
Let's come to the south side. I mean, one of the key states that we can watch is Akwa Ibom. I mean, considering the rift between the present governor and the outgoing senator, so to say, Akpabio, and
he's outgone.
Words that is. Do we see an upset?
For me, essentially, if you look at the sentiment, Akwa Ibom is predominantly a PDP state. And the political tsunami, so to speak, that happened to Godswill Akpabio will play out again on Saturday. I don't see any major. I know that the APC is very interested in that seat, but Akpabio was not able to deliver his senatorial district for himself. So I find it difficult if he's going to get. Those are essentially PDP strongholds.
Let's now also look at. I'm sorry to have to take you back to the southeast. I mean, to the east, southeast, so to say. Imo State. This week's suspension of Governor Roche's Okorocha from the ruling APC, and the results of the presidential and National Assembly elections in most states. there's a power game between Okorocha and his estranged from former political associates within the APC. Is APC going to lose their foothold?
No, that's why I say it's difficult. Because if you look at the scenarios that brought Okorocha back as one of the prospective senators, but I'm sure the firework, so to speak, there is that his son-in-law, who has moved into another party, there's a likelihood they will use the instrument of the party in the state to support the other guy against the ruling party. How it's going to play out is really difficult, but where it's clearer in Ogun, where the governor has taken a position, ab initio, that I will deliver you and I'll deliver myself for senatorial district, but for governorship, count me out. That's very, I see that as an anti-party activity. And could go into the presidency and present a candidate. I saw that as a rape on democracy. Where a president can endorse somebody from another party. That's do for me now, if I can paraphrase this word, then vote for. That was a misnomer. Yeah. So the Ogun is clear, but that of Imo is. If I think too that if the power play is so tense, there's a likelihood that the two major players may just play themselves out, and one of these other parties can just take the day.
Interesting. Well, we look forward to Saturday's election. Well, on a final note, Mr. as Nigerians go out to the polls again, what will be your message to Nigerians?
Please vote your conscience and don't be intimidated by vote buying orchestras moving around the place. Each time you collect money and you just press the ballot paper in favor of somebody that cannot represent you, you have actually mortgaged your future for a pot of porridge. So we appeal that people should vote according to their conscience and vote for people and parties that can represent their aspiration. And don't look onto political leaders who are beneficiaries of the process and see them as leaders. Actually, they are not leaders, so to speak. They are actually making you not to make progress, even when they address themselves as progressive. So on the final note, let's go out, vote according to our conscience, and vote the candidates of our choice.
Thank you very, very much, sir, for your insightful analysis. We look forward to having you again on SaharaTV.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.